alakṣaṇo na kaś-cic bhāvaḥ saṃvidyate kaś-cic asaty alakṣaṇe bhāve kramatāṃ kuha lakṣaṇam.
alakṣaṇo na kaś-cic bhāvaḥ saṃvidyate kaś-cic asaty alakṣaṇe bhāve kramatāṃ kuha lakṣaṇam. MMK chapter 5 verse 2. But a thing without characteristics is not encountered anywhere at all. In the absence of a thing without characteristics, where could characterizing gain a foothold? So let's go from the English. But is cha. And Anne MacDonald added a footnote on that subject in one of her papers, pointing out that in this verse and also in verse 4.2, where it says nachastyarta kaś-cic, the chain cha-asti is also what she calls adversative. So in that verse I translated as and, but it did have an adversative sense. In here I translated as but. So a thing is bhāvaḥ, nominative singular masculine, without characteristics, alakṣaṇe, also nominative singular masculine, agreeing with bhāvaḥ. A thing without characteristics. Bhāvaḥ alakṣaṇe is not encountered na saṃvidyate. So na vidyate, we've had many times, means is not found, and the addition of the prefix sam is probably just to bring the number of padas, number of syllables in the second pada up to 8. But it includes a sense of together. Na vidyate, not found together, not encountered, I translated. Anywhere is na kaś-cic, so not somewhere, na kaś-cic, not anywhere. At all, na kaś-cic. So from the Sanskrit, alakṣaṇe, without characteristics. Before na goes to no, alakṣaṇo na kaś-cic. So without nothing, not without characteristics, kaś-cic, anything, cha, but, bhāvaḥ, existence, thing, existent thing, saṃvidyate, is encountered, kaś-cic, anywhere. alakṣaṇo na kaś-cic bhāvaḥ saṃvidyate kaś-cic. But a thing without characteristics is not encountered anywhere at all. So he's talking about space, and it's false to say that space exists a priori and then it has characteristics. That's what's being refuted. In the same way that in the previous verse, physicality was refuted. There is no body, the thing unto itself. But that does not mean that we should forget about physicality and the meat to eat breakfast. And in the same way with space, it's false to conceive of space as existing a priori, as a non-empty thing, as a sort of stage on which we act. Because a stage on which we act does exist a priori, but there's no space separate from our action. This is also a point that's picked up in various koans in Shobogenzo. So what is space then? What are the characteristics of empty space? I was thinking that this morning and thinking in terms of Alexander work, because I was talking about time yesterday, the sense of having plenty of time if you're a patient person, or having a sense of being pushed for time if you're an impatient person, as I said I was. And that's a bit like saying, as I once said to Marjorie, I'm a terrible end gainer. And she said, stop, look, you choose. End gaining means going directly for the target. So here you are, here's a stimulus, move your leg. You choose whether to gain the end directly or do the work of inhibiting and directing it. It's up to you. So that was one aspect of her teaching. But then reflecting on that, I also remember her saying to me once, at the end of a lesson, she said, you're an inveterate worrier, aren't you? And she paused for a minute and said, I know, because I am too. So that, in a sense, goes against the teaching of emptiness. It's saying kind of you're inherently like that. And maybe the truth is somewhere in the middle. Each of us does have our sort of inherent tendencies. So I think, I'm better suited to being an explorer. If we're talking in terms of the metaphor of gold mining, I'm better off going off into the forest and exploring for it than I will be making fine jewellery and selling it to customers as a salesman in a jewellery shop. So there we are. It doesn't. That kind of discussion doesn't really fit with the teaching of emptiness. But what are you going to do about it? In the sense that there's the wisdom of nausea as it is, So what does it mean in terms of Alexander work? Well, what I experienced at Marjorie's teaching table, if I put it into words, which will probably, again, go against the principle of emptiness, there was a sense for a person who was habitually subject to feel pushed for time and to feel like the world is pushing in on him. Things getting on top of me. I've got to do this and do that. You see, for 13 years before I came to the Alexander work, I'd been sitting under this false idea of you can do upright posture. So what I'm doing now as I stiffen up is I'm contracting space. I'm shortening the spine and narrowing the back. It feels like I'm lengthening the spine, but what's actually going on is a series of muscular contractions that are sort of pulling vertebra onto vertebra. And there's a kind of strength in that, in playing rugby and weight training. It's not that my spine was a weak structure already, but if you want more space, you have to go in the opposite direction, which is not contraction, but release. So muscular release, gives you more space, and that's what you're asking for with the Alexander directions. Let the neck release to let the head go forward and up. To let the head go forward and up. And as I said these directions yesterday, I was quite aware they weren't working. That's why I made my little joke about bring on the strippers, Because when you see you're giving directions and they're not working, it's generally because you're trying to be right. You're trying to do them. So your words and your action are not meeting each other, not encountering each other. So to let the neck be free starts with the word let. You can't do it. It's really, you could say it's the grace of God or the benevolence of the Dharma, as Jima Sensei used to say. You're wishing for something that you can't do. But there again, as Nelly Benor emphasised, it's wishing that won't take no for an answer. You really mean it. Again, Marjorie didn't like people saying, let the neck be free, let the head go forward, and blah, 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 in a kind of sing-song way. The words haven't got any power unless they're backed by some kind of understanding. To let the neck release, to let the head go forward, so pulling the head back onto the spine is a little contraction of space, and letting the head go forward, Marjorie would say, that's where it wants to go, is an imperceptible expansion of space. Expansion of space. You see, it's difficult to put into words, but if you say an expansion in space, that's the non-empty conception of pre-existing space in which something happens. And that is what this verse is negating. So the second line, in the absence, asaty. Locative of as to be is sat, and so present participle of as to be is sat, locative of that is sati, and negative asaty. So sati means there being present, asaty means there being absent. Then it's a locative absolute phrase, so where something, something, something. So asaty alakṣaṇe bhāve. So bhava is thing, alakṣaṇa is without characteristics. So alakṣaṇe bhāve, locative, a thing without characteristics. Asaty, in the absence, or being absent. So asaty alakṣaṇe bhāve, a thing without characteristics, being absent. Or where a thing without characteristics is absent. Or, as I've translated it, in the absence of a thing without characteristics. So there is no space without characteristics. Everywhere. So where I'm sitting now is a great place to experience space expanding. Except, you probably can't hear it with this MacBook microphone, but in the forest, so Master Dorgan said, "Furi sorin, don't leave the forest." And back in his day, I should think the forest is a quieter place than it is in our day, because it's difficult to go to a forest where there isn't somebody operating a chainsaw in the near or far distance. So at the moment, it's not impinging on me too badly. But if the chainsaw comes closer, with a somewhat autistic tendency, I would like to do that, and that is the opposite of listening. So again, working with Paul Medal briefly in his ear-voice connection workshop, he talks about the portrait of Beethoven when Beethoven was losing his hearing, and he said he could see in Beethoven's face the effort to sort of listen, even though it was getting more and more difficult. So the facial muscles are released. In the whispered R, in the Alexander technique, it's the same. You can't do whispered R if you're kind of grimacing. Not only does it affect the voice, but even more fundamentally, grimacing with your face, tension in the face, affects the muscles of the ear, which are responsible for listening to sound. So if that chainsaw gets too loud, on a very imperceptible level, I'll start contracting. My face and my ears will start contracting to sort of block out, because I haven't got a very good filter in my auditory system. It's like the filtering needs help from the muscles. So sometimes I've been on the Alexander training course where they had a big fridge and I wouldn't be aware of it until it just sort of, as fridges do, it reached the right temperature and went off. And then suddenly you'd notice that you'd been tensing for minutes on end because of the noise of the bloody fridge. So again, it has to do with space. What we want, if we're thinking of mindfulness of breathing, what we want is I will breathe in, I will breathe out. The respiratory mechanism will be free to function as nature intended. Well, what can I do to help that along? Well, the Alexander principle is you can't do anything, but you can do plenty to stop it working as nature intended. For example, this. So if you sit like this, the respiratory mechanism can't work as nature intended, and that's why people meditate on their abdominal breathing. So they're doing the breathing. Again, I learned that in karate, because if you're in a fight, then you've got to be ready for somebody to kick you in the, then you do want to do abdominal. You don't want to. If you breathe as nature intended in a full contact fight, then somebody's going to kick you in the abdomen when you're in the middle of a sort of a nice, easy, natural breath, and you'll be winded. So there are times where you don't want to breathe as nature intended. But again, I had a friend on the Alexander training course who was a trumpeter, and he said, when you're exerting yourself, like if you're digging or you're playing the trumpet, you don't breathe in that sort of easy, natural way, like when you're relaxing or when you're practicing zazen. But when you're practicing zazen, you don't want to breathe like a trumpeter and don't want to breathe like a martial artist in the middle of a fight. You just want to let it work. And the Buddha's instructions, sabakaya pati saṃvidyate asaty samiti sikati. One trains oneself. So in that phrase, sikati, train oneself, doesn't mean do something, it means not do something. I'll train myself iti, thinking, or with the awareness that, with the whole body informed with thought, I will breathe in, I will breathe out. That's what the Alexander work's all about. You're informing the whole body with space expanding thought, space expanding thinking, which means simply, I wish to allow the neck to release, to let the head go forward and up, as opposed to pulling it back and down. See, this looks like forward and down, but actually this is also Alexander's back and down, because at the level of the spine, top of the spine, the head is still being pulled back and down. That's what Alexander meant by back and down, the contracting of space, back and down. And you want the opposite, you want the non-contracting of space, which you might call the expanding of space. So head forward and up to let the spine lengthen. So stop pulling your head down towards your pelvis and contracting the spine. Even though there's a kind of strength in that. If you're going to vigorously exert yourself or something, you're going to be lifting up a massive heavy object. You want to kind of gird your loins then. But if you're just sitting in zazen, you want the opposite. You want the space between the head and the pelvis to expand. Then you can breathe. If you expand upwards, the back widens like an umbrella, so all opening out. Spine to lengthen, back to widen. And for more space in the lower back and the hips, send the knees forwards and away. So you've got this very unfortunate instruction traced back to Master Kordo Sawaki about pushing the knees into the ground and pressing the head up to the ceiling. No good. Absolutely no good. It's an instruction for doing, born of ignorance. See, it's a false representation. You see, in Shobo Genzo, Master Dogen's master, poetically, he spoke about digging a cave for ourselves in space. So he's a poet. So he's expressing the point that Zazen is a kind of space exploration. But again, it's a difference between exploring. The true way to respond to that bit of poetry is to explore for oneself what it means to dig out a cave in space. And what it doesn't mean is that space is there pre-existing and you take your spade and dig into something that's existing a priori. That's what Nagarjuna wants us to prevent that misunderstanding. So it's poetically, Master Tendo's sort of suggesting his experience that Zazen is space exploration, put it that way. But see, I digressed. I was going to make that point about exploring, because I was reflecting on it this morning. One of the things my wife has said to me from time to time, my grandmother also said it, is I go too far. That's the wrong kind of exploring. So explorers, again, by nature, tend to push the limits, and I've been like that since I was a small child. In one word, a pest. Someone who always explores the limits. So, for example, when I was very young, my mother told me that God is always watching me. I found out later it was something her mother had told her as just a social control tactic. Because if God's always watching you, you think God's always watching you, it saves the mother from the trouble of having to do it herself. But I took it on board, and also the principle of always telling the truth. But then, in the spirit of exploration, when I was in my sort of late teens, or not even late teens, mid-teens, I remember kind of experimenting with exploring the opposite principle. What would that be like if you didn't tell the truth, you know? And so I got a reputation for being a bullshitter, which I cultivated, you know, and turned to my advantage. I found how it could work. So I remember, I think when I was 14, I was passing we were passing a record shop, and I think the album cover of the band War, I think that's what stimulated it. But anyway, I just said off the cuff, oh, I've got a friend who's got a load of photos of people having their heads chopped off. That, you know, that photo's nothing. And I said it in such a way as to invite my friends to think that I was bullshitting. My bullshitting. And so I let them carry on with that way of thinking until it actually got to the point where we bet money whether it was true or not, because they were so convinced I was bullshitting. They actually bet me money. But and of course I did have a friend, my friend Kevin, who's I've mentioned to you, his son George died a couple of years ago of a brain tumour. Kevin's dad, Don Grant, had been with his father in China during the Boxer uprising, and had an album full of these terrible photos of, you know, severed heads being hung up in baskets outside the city walls and so on and so forth. So there's one day off school where 3 or 4 of my friends came round to my house, and I'd paid Kevin 50p to smuggle a photo album over to me, and so we all had a good day drinking homebrew beer and acting silly, and they were astonished to find that I'd been actually telling the truth. But no, the reason I say it is, although I realised early on that if you told the truth, it was the best way of getting out of trouble often, just to front up and be honest about things. I did also have a phase where I wanted to explore the limits of the opposite thing, so I got a reputation of being a bullshitter. So that's the bad thing about being an explorer. It can be the bad thing about being an explorer, that you take things too far. So I've spent a couple of months making these big compost heaps. I can see various places around me, and I've prepared the ground to build a polytunnel. So I should be going back to Norwich in a couple of weeks' time, where I've ordered a polytunnel on eBay. And so then I asked my wife, well, I asked to measure it, make sure it fit in the car, and then having confirmed that, so maybe I'll get another one. I could have two poly. And she said, Mike, you always go too far. Wait until next year and see if you want one then. So exploring space. Asaty alakṣaṇe bhāve kramatāṃ kuha lakṣaṇam. Where is kuha? Gain a foothold is kramatāṃ. So kram means to step. We had it in the word kramaha at the end of chapter 4, where it means step or progression. But in the middle voice, its meanings include to be applicable, to be applicable. And kramatāṃ is third person singular imperative of kram. So it means let it apply itself. So it's kramatāṃ kuha lakṣaṇam. Let lakṣaṇam, a characteristic, or let characterizing, because it's a na action noun again, let characterizing kramatāṃ apply itself, kuha, where. Let characterizing apply itself where. And then Anne MacDonald has useful footnotes on this. She says, the focus is on where the characteristic could appear, could apply itself. That is, it requires first and foremost somewhere to exist, to constitute itself. This is especially suggested by the use of the verb kram, which in its atmane pada form, that means the middle voice, it can mean to gain a footing. So that fits, to gain a footing. So I've translated gain a foothold. It actually works even better when you translate lakṣaṇam not as a characteristic, but as characterizing. So it has the active sense. Where could characterizing gain a foothold? So again, from the English, second line. In the absence of a thing, asaty bhāve. In the absence of a thing without characteristics, asaty alakṣaṇe bhāve. Where, kuha, could characterizing, lakṣaṇam, gain a foothold, kramatāṃ. So again, the point is, if we think of space pre-existing a priori as a thing without characteristics, then how does it come to have characteristics? That's the meaning of the question. Where could characterizing get started? Where could it gain a foothold? And that question, that exploration, continues in the next verse.
alakṣaṇo na kaś-cic bhāvaḥ saṃvidyate kvacit asaty alakṣaṇe bhāve kramatāṃ kuha lakṣaṇam.